Hello and welcome to Woman Inherits the Earth, a mother-daughter podcast about the representation of women in movies and television. I am Tess Adair, a writer and the author of the paranormal mystery series The Qurans and Chronicles, and Beth's daughter.
And I am Beth Von Baron, Tessa's mother, and also a writer. In this podcast, we talk about movies and television that feature women as the leading characters or where the story focuses on women or women's issues. Our discussions will also touch on roles available to women, how men have dominated the film industry since its beginnings, and whether or not that is changing. Today we are discussing Birds of Prey, which was released in 2020 but was filmed, I think, in 2019. Actually, the full title is Birds of Prey and the Fantabulous Emancipation of One Harley Quinn. Mm-hmm. It was directed by Kathy Yan, Y-A-N. The main writer was written by Christina Hodson, based on the Harley Quinn character created by Paul Dini, D-I-N-I, and Bruce Timm. Mm-hmm. Running time is 1 hour and 49 minutes, based on DC characters. Tess is going to get into that. It's set in Gotham, which is very familiar to most people because that's where Batman is set. Very cartoonish. And that's it. Do you want to take it away, Tess?
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the background before we get into the actual plot of the movie. And I guess I'll start with Harley Quinn as a character. She has a pretty unique origin as a character in that she was not created for the comics. She was created for Batman the Animated Series in the 90s, which, you know, to most people, you don't really think of, like, animated series as being that important, but to real Batman fans, Batman the Animated Series is, like, a seminal work. It was kind of this... Yeah, it had this very specific noir style. It is renowned for having this very particular aesthetic to it. And in some ways, it made these intentional callbacks to the 1960s series, but it is largely seen as a much more serious endeavor than the 1960s series. And it kind of brought that more noir aesthetic to the screen version of Batman, which had previously been the 1960s series and then the Tim Burton movies, which are noir-esque, but they're actually a much more cartoony noir look than the animated series has. I mean, the animated series is still a cartoon, but they do this very careful visual aesthetic with shadows and stuff like actual noir film. So anyway, Harley Quinn was created for that show to be the Joker's kind of main sidekick and someone that Batman actually faces off with instead of, you know, like the main henchman that you face off with in lieu of the quote unquote big boss. And then she was just so popular that she was actually, I feel like she was largely popular as an aesthetic. Like a Harley Quinn costume became a really popular thing long before Harley Quinn got any other representation on film. But she did have her own comic book after the TV show.
And was her costume Harlequin-like in nature?
Yes. Originally, she looks like a Harlequin. Her colors are red and black, and it's the alternating, you know, one side is red, the other side is black, and then it alternates, and there's the diamond pattern is a big thing for her. She was basically kind of visually like a female Joker, but with a Harlequin twist. And as Margot Robbie says in the film, a Harlequin is a doll that is made to perform for other people. And her character background is that she was a PhD holding psychologist who met the Joker while he was in Arkham Asylum, and basically she fell in love with him and went insane and let him out of the asylum and then became his sidekick.
Well, that brings up a question, because she mentions that story at the beginning of the movie, but then later on in the movie she says she went to medical school. So that was a question for me, and we can address that later.
I think she did both. She's like a very educated character.
Okay.
And it's sort of this intentional, like, it has always been this intentional sort of subversion, because the voice that Margot Robbie is doing, that like extreme sort of New Jersey
New Jersey, yeah.
accent, has always been a part of the character. That was like part of her defining characteristic, and that voice is seen as such a like low class, like working class kind of dumb girl voice, and then surprise, she has a PhD and a medical degree and is like actually really smart. And they play with that a lot in the movie. She'll have these lines where she sounds crazy, and then she'll suddenly like stare right into a character's eyes and just like diagnose all of their psychological problems.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the Harley Quinn background. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the production background of this movie, because it's complicated. I think it kind of speaks to some general Hollywood production issues. So prior to this movie coming out, so this is a DC movie, in case anyone wasn't sure, Batman property equals DC property. Before this movie came out, in 2016, a movie called Suicide Squad came out. I'm going to refer to that as the David Ayer Suicide Squad, because after Birds of Prey, there was another Suicide Squad movie that was called The Suicide Squad. I don't know why they didn't give it a slightly more distinct title, but that's what they did, and that was basically a soft relaunch of Suicide Squad. So the original David Ayer Suicide Squad in 2016 was widely panned. It did have Harley Quinn as a character. It also had Will Smith playing Deadshot, and a number of other actors who were moderately well known. It also had Jared Leto's version of the Joker.
Were they animated movies? Or...
No, this was a live action movie, but it kind of didn't fully have a script. Or like it did have a script, but not the way that they made Suicide Squad was they just filmed hours and hours of footage with the idea that David Ayer would find the story in the edit.
Oh, wow.
Which is a really stupid way to
you think?
Go about your movie. I mean, maybe if you were doing like an indie low budget thing where like it's just supposed to be slice of life, you could do that. But this was supposed to be a high octane action comic book movie, and it did not really work. The general consensus for critics and audiences was that the movie was pretty bad, but a lot of people really liked Margot Robbie as Harley Quinn. There was basically the only positive that people had was Margot Robbie really nailed that role, and it would be great to see her do that role again, even though we don't really want anything else from this movie.
Yeah.
Which is basically part of how Birds of Prey as a movie was able to happen. Birds of Prey didn't do super well. It certainly didn't do like Wonder Woman numbers, but it did do better than Suicide Squad. And it came out in 2020, a year when like no movies did that well. So for a 2020 movie, it did okay. And after Birds of Prey in 2020, they came out in 2021 with The Suicide Squad, or what I will call James Gunn's Suicide Squad. That one did a lot better. It helped that they had a script. And it kind of served as like you can sort of say that it's in continuity with the original movie, but it basically kind of threw out the original movie and just sort of redid it. I think the only two actors who are consistent between the two are Margot Robbie and Viola Davis. Viola Davis as Amanda Waller. It's possible that Joel Kinnaman as Colonel Rick Flag is in both. So they basically just rebooted it. It's still the Suicide Squad concept. It's still got Harley Quinn, but it's basically not in continuity with the original one. I don't know if the success of that one is why they did this, but the second Suicide Squad is directed by James Gunn, written and directed by James Gunn, who has done a lot of stuff before. He's most well known for directing the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. So it has kind of been seen as a move where DC took a director from Marvel, and now they've basically appointed James Gunn to kind of reboot their whole DC universe. So we're, in
interesting.
theory, over the next couple of years, we're going to see a whole new spate of DC movies that are not going to be in continuity with all of the previous ones of the past few years. And James Gunn is kind of in charge of crafting that universe. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like, but you could sort of see his version of Suicide Squad as his, like, unofficial audition for this. And again, it helps that he wrote a script.
Stylistically, was it his version of Suicide Squad? Was that in alignment with the style of this movie? Even though he didn't direct this one?
I think it is. It has things in common with this movie. I definitely think his take on Harley Quinn is inspired by this movie. I think his Harley Quinn is in continuity with this movie and not really with the original one. And he specifically went to Margot Robbie and, like, worked with her to come up with her new look for the movie, and, like, the direction for her character. One of the things that is visually striking about this movie is every time Harley Quinn gets into a fight, there's often this, like, kind of explosion of color. That continues in the James Gunn Suicide Squad movie. Okay. He specifically said that, like, he imagines that all of her fights are basically happening from her perspective, and she's kind of crazy. So, like, in the fights in the Suicide Squad movie, every time she hits someone, there's, like, an explosion of flowers. So, and which is a very, like, is a visual callback, I think, to her opening fight scene in this movie where she's, like, hitting them with those, like, colorful powders or whatever it is.
She's shooting a gun that has bullets in it that are not bullets. They're like big wads of color. And,
I think
rocks of color.
I think there's a couple different things in the gun, none of which are bullets, because there's, like, these, like, almost hacky sack looking things that come out of the gun too.
That's what it looks like, yeah. But they explode like a paint gun would.
Yeah, exactly. And that kind of brings me to another thing that I wanted to talk about, which is in the original Suicide Squad movie. And, you know, to an extent, this does go back to Harley Quinn's reception in fandom. So Harley Quinn was conceived as kind of a comedic relief character for the comic book, but she did have for the cartoon, but she did have a very distinctive style. And dressing up as Harley Quinn became really popular, and a lot of those outfits are very catered to the male gaze. She was kind of an object of the male gaze for a long time, and that's extremely true in the first Suicide Squad movie. If you look at her outfit for that movie, it's not her traditional Harley Quinn outfit. It's, like, basically this pair of underwear for shorts and a see-through torn t-shirt. So, like, most of her skin is exposed, and the way that she's shot is, like, very sexualizing. It's a lot of long shots of her body, and she's played by Margot Robbie, who's beautiful. Basically, Harley Quinn in the David Ayer Suicide Squad is just very male gaze focused. And there was an intentional shift in this movie, which carried through to the second Suicide Squad, to change that. You know, she's still a very visual character, and her costuming is clearly very important to the character and to the film, but you can see a very big change. I mean, for starters, for half of this movie, she's wearing full-length pants. She's wearing clothes that are very feminine, but in a way that does not sexualize her. Like, she's still wearing, like, crop tops, but it's a crop top underneath, what are they called? Overalls. There were a couple of film moments that I feel like have brought back jumpsuits into fashion. I feel like it started with Fleabag, because in the second season of Fleabag, in the first episode, Phoebe Waller-Bridge comes out in this, like, black jumpsuit that sent the internet afire. Lit the internet on fire. People were talking about that jumpsuit for weeks. And then this movie came out where Margot Robbie is in the gold overalls for the final fight. And then after that, the Barbie movie. As we have already talked about, there's the big disco dance scene where Margot Robbie, again, is wearing a gold jumpsuit. It's more of a champagne-y gold, but between all of those things, I feel like there has been a huge kind of resurgence in the popularity of jumpsuits, which I feel is kind of a somewhat unconscious feminist statement, because a jumpsuit is like still kind of a very feminine piece of clothing. Like it's a whole, men don't typically wear a single piece of clothing that covers their whole body. Typically that's, dresses. And the jumpsuit is sort of a dress but with pants. But it's also one of the few pieces of clothing that kind of inherently defeminizes the body a little bit. Like it's often a little bit loose fitting in order to be something that you can move in. It looks very similar to the kind of thing that you might wear as like a construction worker, or, those kind of like coveralls. If you're doing like sort of dirty work. But the jumpsuits that you see that are fashionable are usually very colorful. So it's got this sort of feminine aesthetic to it, but at the same time, it just doesn't cater to the male gaze at all. And I'm on Instagram's threads, and just like every once in a while, I'll just see a thread from some woman talking about how like some guy came up to her out of nowhere to tell her that men don't like the jumpsuits. Men don't like when women wear the jumpsuits. It's not attractive.
Oh, really?
And usually the replies are filled with women being like, all right, I gotta buy some more jumpsuits.
Yeah.
I feel like the fashion of this movie is kind of underlying the overall statement. We're taking this character who was kind of originally, to some extent, conceived for the male gaze and pivoting her to be this like basically this character for the female gaze. Everything about her design is like super colorful, but not sexual. It's very, she has been designed to appeal to what women like and not what men like.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think that's all I really wanted to say about the background. And then, the James Gunn's Suicide Squad kind of continued that. She did not go back into the tiny little underwear pants. Spends most of that movie in a giant red ball gown.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you want to touch on the plot a little bit, or?
Yeah. So let's get into the plot. And I'll also, in talking about the plot, I'll kind of cover our main characters. Obviously, Harley Quinn is our main character, but we've got 4 other main characters happening as well. Harley's plot begins with she and the Joker have broken up. This movie is technically in continuity with the David Ayer Suicide Squad, and in that movie, Harley Quinn and the Joker are still together, and basically in between movies, they broke up for reasons that we don't really know, but it is pretty consistent throughout every incarnation of Harley Quinn that her relationship with the Joker is incredibly toxic. He is very abusive. He orders her around and doesn't really care about her as anything other than a possession.
Well, who played the Joker in
Suicide Squad? Jared Leto.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it was a weird turn for him.
Not Jack Nicholson.
Oh, yeah. No, yeah, it was Jared Leto. That would have been wild if we're supposed to believe that Margot Robbie was in a relationship with Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, well, or Heath Ledger, who would have been a more believable.
Yeah, but the current DC movies are not in continuity with the Christopher Nolan movies.
Okay.
Harley Quinn has broken up with the Joker, and she doesn't have very good friends. She tries to go hang out with her roller derby friends. We get some scenes of her doing roller derby, which were not as unrealistic as they could have been. Roller derby is a pretty violent sport. It's pretty much an all-female sport, I think. I don't know if there are any male. Yeah, I think it's only female.
I don't think so. It's mostly women, yeah.
So we show her beating the hell out of some people in roller derby and then going out afterward with her roller derby team, only to overhear them kind of shit-talking her and saying that they don't really believe that she's going to stay broken up with the Joker and that she doesn't really have her own personality. So she leaves them and goes and gets drunk at a nightclub owned by Roman Sionis, who is played by Ewan McGregor in this movie. And I gotta say, I feel like Ewan McGregor has maybe the broadest range of ability to play unlikable and likable. Like, when he turns on the charm, he is the most charming man in the room. But when he plays an unlikable character,
He is totally. I would say David Tennant is in that group.
Yes.
But yeah, they are, both of them are able to do both. And actually, in this movie, he's the only man I really remember. The other male characters are kind of like interchangeable in my mind. So he definitely left a.
I mean, I think that's intentional. I think you are supposed to remember Zaz, but apart from that, all of the men are sort of supposed to be background characters, the way women usually are in films.
Right, and that is reversed in this film.
So she goes and gets drunk in this nightclub owned by Roman Sionis, and she breaks his driver's leg in a fit of pique. I mean, the guy calls her a slut, so she turns around and breaks his leg, because that is her function as the Joker's lackey, is that she's kind of a bruiser. That's what she does for the Joker. She beats people up. Doesn't usually use guns. She usually uses some form of bat. That is,
and she's good at it. She picks when she's looking for weapons throughout the movie. She's not looking for guns. She's looking for something that she can hit people with.
Yeah, she likes some form of bat. And this movie kind of implies that that's a holdover from when she was brought up by the nuns. In the montage where we show her background, they show the nuns spanking her with a kind of paddle.
Yeah, and nuns are notorious for slapping children, or they were slapping children's hands.
Yes.
In Catholic schools, and I'm assuming this no longer happens, but it was happening as late as the 80s, from what I understand. So, yeah, they were pretty notorious for that.
And the implication is that is why that's the weapon that she prefers.
And she's good at it. She's developed her skill set with bats and other things. At one point, she has a mallet.
Yeah.
She's really good at that.
Yeah. So she breaks that guy's legs, then while drunk meets Dinah Lance, also known as Black Canary, also known as the woman with the best hair in this film.
She has great hair. Yeah. That actress,
Journey Smollett Bell.
Yeah, she is beautiful. Yeah. I mean, she's entrancingly beautiful.
Yeah, she's fantastic. So Harley Quinn meets Dinah Lance. I'm probably just going to call her Black Canary because that's kind of a more memorable name.
Good idea.
The singer of the club. And they don't exactly bond, but they exchange some words, and this is where we get Harley Quinn talking about what a harlequin is in this kind of, she's drunk and she's sad, and she's sort of talking about how she doesn't really have any purpose in life. Meanwhile, she has avoided telling Sionis that she and the Joker have broken up, which is a good thing in this moment because we very soon learn that Sionis hates her and has only avoided hurting her in the past because he's afraid of the Joker. So Harley ends up alone in the alleyway outside the club, and a couple of guys try to abduct her, but Black Canary comes out and sees this, and after some hesitation beats up the guys and rescues Harley.
Rescues her. Yeah.
Unfortunately for her, Sionis sees her doing this, or I think it's actually his sidekick Zaz sees her beating up these guys and points it out to Sionis, and Sionis decides that she will be his new driver since Harley just crippled his other driver. And she isn't really given a choice about this. Zaz shows up and just tells her, "You're the new driver." She doesn't really get to say no.
And by the way, her character is Canary, but she's also driving a yellow Jag, and it looks like it's probably a circa early 1980s Jaguar. But it's yellow. It's canary yellow.
Yeah, canary yellow. Yeah. And her costuming, I'm probably going to keep talking about the costuming throughout this whole thing. Her costuming is always kind of a mix of gold and black. Harley's costuming, on the other hand, I mean, it's very colorful, but there's kind of like, sometimes it's pink and blue, and sometimes it's pink and gold. But it's always that kind of two colors that are very vibrant, kind of smashed together. So it's always sort of an echo of the black and the red, but it's never black and red for this whole movie. All right. They tell some of this out of order, so I'm going to try to just tell it as...
Yeah, I was going to interrupt you for a minute there and say there are two scenes in the movie where Harley Quinn is incredibly drunk. And because they tell it in kind of flashbacks or telegraphing, or I don't know how what they're using, but you're like 5 minutes into the film before she says, well, let me back up here and tell you the beginning of this, and they go back and she tells the story over again. So it could be that it's the same scene.
I think it is.
We're seeing it at two different places, but it gives you the illusion that this is a character who gets wildly drunk all the time.
Yeah.
But really, if it's just one time, then it's just one time.
And I think part of what's happening is the first time we see it from Harley's perspective, and she makes it look like a really fun time. Like she has a great time. Yeah. She's just dancing. And then we see it from Black Canary's perspective, where she goes up to the bar and Harley Quinn is like unable to stand up on her own and moping about how she doesn't have anything going for her. Right. So it's kind of like, what you want your night out to be like, and then what it's actually like. The whole thing is kind of strung together by Harley's voiceover, which is how we know that we've gone back in time. I guess the next thing we probably want to talk about is Renee Montoya. I'm trying to think which of these will make sense first. Actually, we'll do Cassandra Cain next, because that's kind of what starts the actual plot, and then we can fit everyone else in. So after Black Canary gets forcibly hired on, Sionis tasks Black Canary and his right-hand man Zaz with keeping this diamond safe, going and collecting this diamond that is mainly important because it has a bunch of information encrypted into it. They're supposed to go do that, and while Black Canary is like getting the car, Zaz insists on holding the diamond. Meanwhile, young Cassandra Cain, who's I guess a preteen is where I would put her. She's like 10 to 13-ish. She's walking down the street and pickpocketing left and right, and she actually tries to pickpocket Black Canary, but Black Canary catches her, and it is revealed that she already knows Cassandra. So she catches her and she's like, hey kid, you don't do this. And then Cassandra Cain keeps going and picks Zaz's pocket and gets the diamond, and he doesn't notice because he's incompetent. Then she almost immediately gets picked up by the police because she's been doing this for a while, and the police, I think some other store that she stole from has like called the police on her. So she gets the diamond and immediately gets taken into police custody, which is where Renee Montoya comes in. So at this point, we've got our main characters are Harley Quinn, Black Canary, Cassandra Cain, and now Renee Montoya, who's a police officer.
So you've got the whole group here. This is the main group of women characters.
There's one more. There's still Huntress. We haven't got Huntress yet.
Oh, right.
Okay, so now we've got Renee Montoya, and we get introduced to her. She's at a crime scene where a bunch of mob guys have been murdered, and she's kind of in charge of the scene. And she knows immediately what is going on, which is also where we get introduced to Huntress. So we see Renee Montoya, and in voiceover, Harley Quinn explains that Montoya grew up on 80s cop films, which is why she always sounds like a cheesy 80s cop.
Well, and a little bit of background here too, and all of these women, these main characters, have something in their backstory that shows where they have been screwed over,
by men,
or abused, or by men. Yeah, I figured that one without saying, but you're right, by men. And Renee's story is that she solved a crime and her boss took credit for it.
Yes.
And so she did not get the promotion she deserved, and it has kind of affected her in the sense that she's a little sloppy. She's not sloppy so much as, but she's kind of she's disgruntled. There's two parts to it. She's both. She's disgruntled, but she's sloppy sometimes, and then she's overzealous. Other times, it's like she can't quite figure out if she wants to do this job or not.
Yeah.
So that's her backstory. And each one of these women has a story where they have been, pardon my language, but fucked over by men.
Yes.
So, and I like her story because it's a realistic one. Happens in the police department a lot, where women, at least historically, women have not been promoted. That's starting to change now a little bit. It's taken a really long time though.
Yeah.
So she's very good at her job, but she's also kind of got mixed feelings, like she doesn't want to be good at it anymore because she's
it feels like she's good at the police work, but she's not good at interacting with her coworkers because they're all men and they don't respect her just based on the fact that she's a woman. Like, if they were paying attention, they would respect her because she's the best cop that they have, but they're not. It's a boys' club. They don't respect her, and there's nothing she can do to earn their respect because she did solve the big case, and her partner took the credit and is now the boss. And now she has to report to the man who stole the credit from her. But so she's looking at these mob killings, and she figures out immediately that most of the men in the room were not important, that there was this one specific guy who the killer was after. And then we do get a flash of the moment that he died, and we see Huntress enter in, and Montoya is correct. Huntress kills everybody else really quickly, and then shoots the main guy that she was going for in the shoulder, and asks if he knows who she is. He doesn't, so she shoots him in the neck, and he slowly chokes to death. And we don't get her backstory right then, but that is our introduction to Huntress, who kills people with a crossbow, which leads to one of the ongoing jokes in the movie. No one knows that she's called Huntress. They keep calling her the crossbow killer.
Well, no one knows that she calls herself Huntress.
But
she doesn't want to be called the crossbow killer. No. She thinks Huntress sounds much more
much cooler,
eloquent. Yeah, and it's cooler. Yeah, and it does. But she's created this whole image of herself in her mind.
Yeah.
But basically, she kills people with crossbows.
Yeah, so, and she's kind of my favorite character because on the one hand, she's sort of the biggest badass out of all of them. She gets like some of the coolest kills, but on the other hand, she's the biggest dork. Every time they talk, she like stumbles over herself. She can't quite like express it. No one will call her the name she wants. She's just...
Well, and her backstory is that she was a member of a crime family.
Yes.
That was killed by Ewan McGregor's character early in the story. Yeah. And and of course, anybody who watches those scenes and they show it twice would be reminded of the Romanov family in Russia. At least that's what I was reminded of.
It's kind of a mob version. She's the one that survived.
Yeah, it's a mob version of that. There's like 10 members of this family, and she gets underneath them, and
the bodies that's how fall on top of her.
Fall on top of her, and that's for 100 years people have thought Anastasia survived the shooting, and then the way that she did it was that she was underneath the other bodies, but it's never been proven. But anyway, that's
I think it's actually been myth disproven at this point.
Disproven, but that's the mythology.
Yeah,
that's what I'm reminded of when they show this scene. They show it twice. Yeah. So she grows up.
She doesn't initially know that it was ordered by Sionis. We don't find that out until the end because Renee Montoya is the one who actually knows that. And kind of throughout the movie, Renee is the only one who like really knows what's going on because as the cop,
she puts all the pieces together.
Yeah, exactly. She's the investigator. Everyone else is kind of in their own little world knowing what they're about, but not what anyone else is about. It's Montoya who always makes the connections because she's a good investigator. The Huntress's backstory is that she was the daughter of this mob family. They were all executed, but one of the goons who was supposed to do the killing found her underneath the bodies and couldn't bring himself to kill her, so instead he snuck her out and brought her to Italy, where she was raised by his father and brother, who were both assassins. So she was raised by assassins and spent her whole life training to be an assassin, and now she has come for her revenge. Which kind of, I feel like, explains both of the sides of her personality. You know, she was trained to be this badass, but also it doesn't seem like she went to school or developed any normal social skills.
Nope, she didn't.
She's just this nerd who can't quite connect with anybody. And isn't interpersonally nearly as cool as she is at killing.
And yet the other women all get her. They all understand her. They recognize it. They know she's got strength. And I think we get a feeling at some point in the movie that they're going to help her develop along a little bit better. So
they all immediately take a liking to her and how good she is at what she does. Yeah, so we get introduced to Montoya in this scene, and then at the end of this scene is when so I did kind of skip past this. After Harley's drunk night out, she decides to blow up the factory that turned her into Harley Quinn. And they don't make this explicit, but it's kind of a reference to how in variations of both the characters Joker and Harley Quinn, it's falling into a vat of chemicals that permanently changes their face.
Right.
So that is the place that she blew up. The factory with the chemicals that gave them their weird faces, their weird comic book faces. And as soon as it happens, Montoya immediately knows that that means that Joker and Harley Quinn have broken up, and none of her male coworkers do. She's the one who figures that out. So she then goes after Harley Quinn.
The reason this is important that they're breaking up, and you may have already said this, is that the Joker is no longer going to protect Harley Quinn.
Yes.
So that's why this is important and why it keeps coming up over and over again in the movie. So
yeah, and that's what Montoya says. Harley Quinn just called open season on herself. So then she goes after her, and that is kind of the background to a chase scene where we get Harley Quinn going to buy an egg breakfast sandwich.
Oh, that is a wonderful scene, and I will just tell you
so good.
That it was heartbreaking.
Yes.
that the sandwich gets, thrown to the street and splats all over the place because they show it being made and very carefully. And if you are a person who likes egg and bacon and cheese on toast, you don't eat bacon. But
I don't eat meat bacon. But my partner makes a version of this sandwich for me for breakfast.
Oh, there you go. So it's a great sandwich. We see it being made, and she's talking over the scene, narrating and talking about the skill this guy has at he's a short order cook, and he makes a sandwich. It looks wonderful. And at one point in the very first one or two scenes after him cooking this sandwich for her, the sandwich just disappeared, and you already think, did she eat it? Did she lose it? But she wanted the sandwich so much, surely she ate it. And then we realize, then she pulls it out of her bra. She's been hiding it in her bra. And before she can eat it, it gets splattered on the ground, and she is just. And it was her last money. She's broke.
She used her last $5.
And she's hungover, so she really needed calories.
And it's Montoya who kills the sandwich.
Yeah.
Earning Harley's ire.
Created an enemy. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So basically Montoya and a number of criminals are going after Harley Quinn.
Everybody.
While she was under the Joker's protection, she pissed off a lot of people. She pissed off a lot of men who interacted with the Joker. She also pissed off a lot of her fellow roller derby players because she plays real rough and breaks a lot of bones. So there's a lot of people going after her, including Montoya, and unfortunately it is Montoya who kills the sandwich. And then Harley Quinn gets cornered by Montoya and a couple of these other people and gets out of it by grabbing 2 nearby bags of trash and tossing them onto Montoya, which is mainly important because when Montoya goes back to the precinct, she has to change into a shirt from Lost and Found and then spends most of the movie wearing this shirt that says, "I shaved my balls for this."
That's great.
So Harley ends up in this big chase scene. She does ultimately get away, mainly because of Huntress. She's about to get cornered again, and then it turns out the guy who's cornering her is on Huntress's list. So Huntress shows up, Harley ducks at the right moment, and Huntress kills the guy. And Harley ends up, again, temporarily getting away until she is finally caught by Sionis's men. Because Sionis has hated her for a long time and has only not hurt her because of the Joker, but now he can kill her. Meanwhile, Cassandra Clare has stolen his diamond. Not Cassandra Clare, Cassandra Cain, I'm sorry. Yeah. Cassandra Clare is a young adult author. Cassandra Cain stole the diamond and swallowed it. Yeah.
She swallowed it. And the thing is, she's a pickpocket who knows how to hide her treasures when she's been arrested. Yes. So after she's arrested, she's sitting in the back seat of the cop car. She starts throwing stuff in. She's broken her arm at some point. She's got a cast on.
She's got a cast. And, yeah, I'm not sure that it's actually broken.
Yeah, it might be fake. But she's got a beautiful pink cast, and she keeps shoving stuff in there, and she puts stuff in her bra because she's old enough to wear a bra, I guess, at this point. But then the diamond is too big. She doesn't want to lose it, so she does what every thief ever has done. swallows it.
And she swallows it, yeah. Meanwhile, Zaz and Black Canary have to go and tell Roman that they lost it. Zaz lies and claims that they never got it, because of course it was Zaz's fault that Cassandra Cain got it. And then Roman goes down to kill Harley in as brutal a manner as he can, but she overhears them talking about the diamond and offers to get it back from him. And we also, at this point, get a little hallucinatory sequence. When Roman hits her, she starts hallucinating that she's Marilyn Monroe in the Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend sequence, except she's wearing a pantsuit instead of a dress. A shiny pink pantsuit, and Zaz and Roman are two of the dancers, and it's kind of it's like a mix of the song. It's a more modern mix of the song. So this is sort of how she's interpreting this torturing her scene.
It brought to mind the T-Bone Burnett modern version of the song, but it's not even that. It's really more hip-hoppy.
Yeah.
And actually at the end of the movie and over the credits, there's another version of it that I can't remember right offhand who the musician is. But the music in this movie is fantastic. There's a lot of good music in here, and I did write the music down. So it's performed by Megan Thee Stallion at the end, over the credits. The music, the song that goes over the credits. It's just called Diamonds in the credits, but it does also credit the sampling of Marilyn Monroe actually singing "Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friend" in this. I can't make Marilyn out in it, but supposedly she's in there. So, and I just want to also throw something in here. So we're talking about Cassandra. It occurred to me at one point in the movie that if this movie had been made by a man, there would have been a whole lot more scatological jokes made about her needing to go to the bathroom or needing to get this diamond out of her. There's a little bit of that in a couple of scenes, not much, but men really like scatological jokes and women don't. So you can just tell. I mean, we know what's happening. We know she has to get rid of this somehow. Although, after watching Grey's Anatomy for 6 months now, I all I can think of is they're going to have to cut that thing out of her. But because it was huge, it was the size of a quarter in diameter, large, and just that could do damage. But anyway,
I mean, it's a cartoon movie,
It's a cartoon movie, but there's not really any scatological jokes in here. Just they treat it very seriously. That they give her laxatives and they give her prune juice, but these are not jokes. They're not scenes that it's set up as a joke.
Yeah. I feel like they also do a really good job of making you care about Cassandra as a character. I kind of feel like in a male-directed version of this, she would not have a personality. She would just be a prop. She would just be a MacGuffin. I mean, and she kind of still is a MacGuffin, but she's a MacGuffin with personality. She's a really good pickpocket, and she knows to hide shit and swallow shit when she gets taken in by the police, and she's sarcastic with everybody. I feel like so much of the time when there's a character that age in a movie that's otherwise for adults, that character just sucks and doesn't feel real at all. But this Cassandra Cain really does feel real and likable. I like her. I'm horrified at the thought of Zaz cutting her open to get the diamond. I want her to survive.
And I would add to that despite there not really being a whole lot of story in this movie, they do spend enough time on character development for the main 4 or 5 women. The 4 women and the teenage girl, that you care about them. You get to understand them. You get to know them. It's probably not enough because there's so much going on in this movie. There's so much fighting. There's so many characters. There are so many characters in this film.
But they do a really good job with efficiency in storytelling. And that is what I like about this movie, and why I like this movie better than Captain Marvel, where Captain Marvel, I felt like I didn't really care that much about any of the characters because they didn't really feel that real to me. But in this movie, despite the fact that there's still a ton of characters, comparatively the plot is very simple. Okay, so Harley makes a deal with Roman where she's going to go after the diamond. And so then she shows up at the police station, and this is where we kind of get the big fight sequence of the film. I mean, there's one at the end too, but this is kind of our first big Harley Quinn fight sequence, where she shows up with this gun that we were talking about that explodes these colorful powders into the air, and they're all pink and blue. And so much of this scene is accentuated by these bright colors. And this is basically she's coming after Cassandra Cain. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to her, Roman goes ahead and puts out a big bounty on Cassandra Cain's head so that Harley will have competition. And we kind of get 3 fight scenes in a row in this police station where they've made this effort to make them very visually distinct. It actually reminded me a lot of John Wick, which I don't think you've seen, but John Wick is a franchise of movies that is basically all about the fight scenes. It's choreographed, I believe, by the same people who choreographed the Matrix movies, and it's kind of this series of movies that is just like devoted to the art of a well choreographed fight scene. Now, in those movies, they mostly use guns, but the main fight scene that I remember takes place in this club that is lit by these different colored lights. So it's kind of this visual display of all of these different colors, and this scene with all of the powders really kind of reminded me of that. They're both these very visually distinctive movies that have put this effort into making the fight scene look a lot better and more interesting than most Marvel fight scenes. Most Marvel fight scenes are just kind of this meaningless, bland chaos where there's just violence and like no real particular visual flair, no vision happening. They're often chaotic and difficult to understand, and they just sort of feel like they're designed to just kind of overwhelm you into a stupor, whereas this one almost feels more like a dance than a fight scene, especially with the way that Harley the way that Harley
it's all
fights.
Choreography. Yeah,
she's always doing flips. There's always these like this cartwheel element,
and they slow it down.
Yeah, they slow it down. Yeah, there's like slow motion. Again, very little use of guns. There are guns, but the main fight happens without the gun, and a lot of it is just Harley Quinn doing cartwheels with a background of blue and pink powder in the air. So that the first chunk of the fight scene has the powders. The second chunk of the fight scene, she breaks into the holding cells where all the prisoners are, and something sets off the sprinklers, the overhead sprinklers. So most of this fight scene happens, basically it looks like it's raining, but like with water coming down, and they do kind of a similar visual thing where like Harley will like kick into the water, and then you'll see this like glorious spray of water in the middle of the fight scene. And then they move past that into the, I guess, evidence room. And this is where we get the cocaine chunk of the fight scene.
Oh, yeah.
She's hiding from these guys, and she ends up jumping behind the biggest stack of cocaine kilos that I've ever seen.
Yeah,
and they shoot the cocaine, and it sprays over her in like a waterfall of cocaine.
And it's a stimulant,
so
it helps her snap to.
Yeah, exactly. You see her kind of suck some of it in, and she smiles and jumps into action again. So those are kind of the 3 fight scenes in the jail, which ends with her successfully getting Cassandra Cain and taking off in a giant minivan with 2 mattresses tied to the top of it.
And this is despite the fact that yet another group is after her, because when to get the doors open, she inadvertently unlocks all the jail doors. So all these prisoners who hate her are coming after her, and that's where so there's still a lot of people in this movie, a lot of characters rather, are going after Harley for a variety of different reasons. She has a lot of enemies.
When she's getting Cassandra Cain out of the cell, you can hear a couple of the people yelling after her. I think one of them says, "You killed my hamster."
Yeah.
So they all have specific reasons to hate her. So then she takes off with Cassandra in the van, and she's actually pretty open with Cassandra about what's going on. She explains that everyone is coming after her because of the diamond, and Cassandra tells her that she swallowed it, and basically Harley Quinn replies with, "Well, then we've got to make you poop, because that diamond is only coming out of you 2 ways. Either we're cutting it out of you, or it's coming out in the toilet." And as they are driving away, another person shows up in a car behind them who we think is maybe another roller derby person. It's a woman, and Harley Quinn lights a firework or something and hands it to Cassandra Cain, and Cassandra Cain tosses it into the woman's car.
There are a lot of easy killings in this movie happening over and over again.
Yeah.
And that kind of just, you're, I guess, expected to just ignore them for the sake of the movement of the story. But I find it a little offensive in some places that they just kill all these people off, and that I don't know. It's one of the problems I have with the movie.
So we eventually get back to Harley's apartment. She takes Cassandra with her to her apartment. We meet the guy who runs the restaurant downstairs, and there's a very particular, Doc. So Harley clearly is very attached to Doc. He's maybe the only person that she has a truly positive relationship with. She's very affectionate with him, and he calls her Lotus Flower.
And he's hidden her for years. Her apartment above his shop is a little hidden, and nobody knows she lives there except Doc. So he has protected her for years.
So they go up into her apartment. I would just like to point out that her apartment is done up in pink and gold, just like most of her outfits in the movie. Most of the wallpaper of the apartment is pink, and then her refrigerator is gold. And those are kind of the two main colors that you can see. She also has a pet hyena that she has named Bruce, which I believe is meant to be after Batman. She named her hyena Bruce after Batman.
She says that.
Yeah.
It was Bruce Wayne, yeah. But it's got to be CGI, I guess. It's pretty bad. I mean,
I think it's a puppet, actually.
It could be a puppet. It doesn't move a lot.
The hyena is just kind of, it's kind of a metaphor for Harley's personality, because it is an incredibly violent animal that she treats like it's a little kitty cat.
Yeah, they're scavengers.
There is a flashback scene where we show that she had the hyena kill and eat the guy that sold it to her. Because he is kind of a jerk.
More violence is just thrown out there, and
I mean,
Harley Quinn realize it's a cartoon. Yeah, that's an interesting thing, because she's a villain even to the end, but she becomes a more kind-hearted villain towards the end. But we're supposed to like her, but there's just so much gratuitous violence that I have a hard time liking her. But we can talk about that later on. Go on with the story.
I don't have the same hard time, but I can see why you would. I just feel like we're in a cartoon world, and I also feel like, I don't know, I've seen so many movies where the gender of this violence is reversed, where we show a man just committing tons of senseless violence to women who have no names, that I think, to me, seeing it reversed is kind of cathartic.
Yeah.
She punches like the women in roller derby, but apart from that, all of her violence is at men.
Aimed at men. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're in the apartment, and Harley thinks that they're safe there, but then the cops knock at her door, and then she goes to look out the window to see if they can flee, and there's some other guy there with like a giant flaming ball of something that he launches at her window. And we think it kills the hyena, but there is a scene at the end where it's revealed that the hyena actually survived. But this is kind of Harley's low point. They have found her home. Her home has been violated. And when she goes downstairs, she discovers that Doc sold her out.
Yeah, but she realizes it before then, too, because she says to her, I don't know how they found us. There's only one person who knew where I lived. And then she kind of sees it in her mind, doesn't want to believe it, goes downstairs, and he is packing up his worldly possessions and taking off because they have paid him a lot of money.
And then because of this betrayal, she sort of gives up and decides that she's just going to give Cass over to Roman instead of trying to get the diamond out of her. Because originally her plan was to just get her to poop out the diamond, and then she would give the diamond to Roman, but she basically decides that she doesn't have time for that because he's coming after her anyway, and she no longer has a safe space. So she agrees to meet up with him at this old carnival, essentially. And that leads us into the finale, because all of our characters end up converging on this carnival for various reasons.
It's a perfect setting because Harley Quinn is a carnival kind of character.
Yes.
So for it to, and all of these things that kind of come out of the woodwork where they're fighting in the streets and in the whatever these things are, these in the carnival, the different scenes. It's pretty appropriate for a movie about basically a Harley Quinn.
And for a movie that has been so visually distinct this whole time. You know, it's gone out of its way to make everything super colorful, to have the whole visual of this movie kind of be in line with Harley Quinn.
Although the scenes in the carnival are not that colorful. They're drab. It's a very drab carnival.
You mean like outside?
So, yeah, all the characters you see mannequins pop up and clowns and things like that.
It's an old carnival. It's been defunct.
It's an old carnival, but it's got that noir feel to it because it's all very dark and drab. And there's shadows, like you mentioned earlier. It's not it's not bright and colorful like you would think of a carnival being.
It's faded colors, yeah.
It's faded colors, yeah.
So Harley goes there with Cass, and Roman sends Zaz and Black Canary to go meet her. And Black Canary has actually secretly been working with Montoya the whole time because she's a character with a conscience, and she sees this as the right thing to do. So she lets Montoya know where they're going, and then Huntress is on the way because she wants to kill Zaz. Zaz is the last person on her list of people who killed her family. So Harley and Cass arrive first, and then Montoya arrives to confront Harley, and Harley kicks her out of a window. And then right after she has kicked her out of a window, Zaz shows up and hits her with not exactly a tranquilizer dart, but some kind of dart that paralyzes her. Then Black Canary goes to cut Cassandra free. Harley has taped her to a toilet. While she's doing that, Zaz turns his gun on her. It's a real gun this time, and says that he knows that she betrayed them, and says that the only way that she can prove that she's still loyal is by cutting open Cassandra's stomach, which she's obviously not gonna do. Not only does she know Cassandra, but also, like, she's been very clearly a moral person this whole movie. Arguably, she's the only person making solely moral decisions.
Yeah, and also this is the point in the movie where things start to turn, and the women start to bond a little bit. And this is where the beginnings of their future of working together starts.
Yeah, this is essentially the origin of the Birds of Prey of the title.
Which, by the way, birds are women.
Yes.
It's over and over again, they refer to women as birds in the movie, and that's why it's Birds of Prey.
Yeah, Zaz and Roman in particular keep referring to women as birds in kind of a dismissive way. So when the women rename themselves Birds of Prey, it's sort of a reclamation of the term. So Zaz is about to kill Black Canary when Huntress shows up and kills him, because he's the last on her list. Around that time, Montoya climbs back in through the window. Everyone except Huntress is sort of yelling at each other because they're all upset over various different things, and Huntress is like, okay, I just came here to kill Zaz. Seems like you all have other stuff going on. I'm just gonna go. But Montoya, the one person who knows everyone's story, convinces her to stay and starts to convince them all that they're all kind of fighting the same person. And Harley really picks up on that and kind of solidifies them as a team. She points out, or they realize that Roman has shown up with an army, and that they're not going to get out of this without banding together. And in fact, that every single one of them has pissed Roman off in one way or another. Huntress has just killed Zaz, who's Roman's best friend. I mean, Harley herself, obviously, Roman has always hated her. Cassandra swallowed his diamond. Black Canary betrayed him, and Montoya is building a case against him.
So they're all they've got their backs against the wall in some ways, because they're in this room, and they are surrounded on all sides by various enemies, the police, and everybody who hates Harley, and then Ian McGregor's character, whose name I can never remember.
Roman Sionis.
Roman's men are all there, so they have to figure out a plan, and they do. They figure out a plan, and they fight everybody off. They kill everybody except Roman.
This is also when Harley changes into the gold overalls, and they don't actually kill everybody. That they kill everyone who comes into the fun house. It's like it's sort of like a House of Mirrors type
House
of thing.
Mirrors, yeah.
It's a bit more than that because there's more stuff going on, but it's like a fun house, which also adds to the kind of visual aesthetic of what's going on. There's also a scene where someone comes up into the room where they are, and Huntress goes down this slide. I think they're all going down the slide, and Huntress is the last to go down, and then this guy comes in after, and she like gets up on the top of the slide and jumps down on him as he's coming down and like kills him on the slide down, which I just thought was kind of the coolest kill of the film. And I think all of the others do too. They're like, whoa, she's so cool. But yeah, then they come down and they have this big long fight in the fun house, where they're all kind of taking turns keeping Cassandra safe. They're all sort of fighting while at the same time pushing her out of harm's way and putting themselves in between her and the harm.
She's a kid, and they're women.
Yeah.
They have paternal instincts, and despite the fact that they have been abused and double-crossed and cheated,
disrespected,
and mistreated, disrespected by men from every aspect of their lives, they are still very loving people. Yeah. You see that in them. You don't even see an ounce of human compassion or love or anything in Roman. He is devoid of positive or compassionate emotion. He's simply not capable.
Yeah.
Most of the characters are not. I mean, they're just they're just dead inside. There's no humanness there.
Yeah.
The only humanity we see is really in these women. Even Cassandra, but she's starting to get there. She's growing up. She spent her her childhood. Who knows? We don't really have a lot of her backstory. But
we don't.
But she's clearly been a victim of the system. But she sees these women treat her with respect, and that has a good effect on her.
Yeah.
So these are the only real characters in the movie who have any semblance of humanity in them.
We don't get a lot of Cassandra's background, but we do see that she immediately takes a shine to Harley. As soon as Harley picks her up, you can just kind of see that she starts hero worshipping her.
Well, Harley is adorable.
Yeah.
I mean, she's hilarious. She's funny. She's cute. She's whimsical, but she's just really smart, verbally smart.
And she's got this outlook on life that clearly appeals to Cassandra. As you said, Cassandra, you can tell, has been poorly done by the system, clearly doesn't respect most authority, doesn't believe in the system, and Harley pretty much starts off by saying, yeah, the system is bullshit. One of the first things that she says to the girl is, paying is for losers. I'm not shopping at this store, I'm robbing this store. When they go and get groceries, Harley steals the groceries, and not through any kind of deceptive means. She just fills a basket with stuff and then runs out. She fills a basket
and runs out the door.
Yeah.
And with people running after her, and she doesn't care.
She doesn't care.
They throw it in the car and take off. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can just tell that appeals to Cassandra, because it's like this adult telling her the secrets. The secret is you don't have to play by the rules. You don't have to pay attention to authority. You just pave your own way. And that's what Cassandra wants to hear. So, of course, she immediately takes a liking to Harley Quinn. And it helps that Harley is very honest all the time. Even when she turns on Cassandra, she technically never lied to her. And she also only turned on her for like a minute, and then immediately, as soon as she saw that Cassandra was actually going to be in danger, did change her mind about that.
Yeah.
So they keep Cassandra safe for that scene, but then they make the mistake of exiting the fun house, and there are actually more people outside, and including Roman, and that's when Roman's people manage to catch Cassandra.
Which seems like an amateur mistake to me.
It does,
because it's like you didn't check and look around and make sure that there was nobody left. You just went out thinking you'd won the day, and then all of a sudden there's all these other people. So it was kind of a ridiculous mistake.
That's my main complaint about the movie, is that I do think it is very silly that they go out at that moment. Like, you saw that there were a lot of people there. Why would you not at least check?
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's done in service of the kind of chaotic speed of the plot, and also it gives us a moment to finally see Black Canary's superpower. Because they go out,
which we didn't realize before was a superpower. We as soon as it happens, it clicks for us, but we didn't see it coming.
Yeah, Harley Quinn does introduce her as having a killer voice, but, we initially just see her singing, so you just think it's metaphorical language. She has a killer voice, as in she's a good singer. And by the way, the song that she's introduced singing is This Is a Man's World.
Yeah.
Very emblematic of...
Written by James Brown.
Yes. The whole movie is about how this is a man's world, and women are trying to make their way in it, which is why all of the villains are men.
And that first scene with her, you do see her singing to a point where it breaks the glass. That's the foreshadowing that she has a
clue,
superpower. So, yeah.
But so they steal Cassandra and they start to drive off, but there's still a group of men pointing guns at our main characters. So Montoya turns to Black Canary and says, "You know what to do," and Black Canary steps out and does this big scream, and you see visual sound waves coming out of her, and they knock everyone aside. And Harley, with her hands over her ears, uses it to propel her, because she's on roller skates, so she uses it to propel her after the cars. And she does manage to catch up to the first car on her own, and she causes it to crash, at which point Huntress shows up on her motorcycle to help Harley get to the other car. And what they're doing here is called a whip, which is a real roller derby move, this is, again, one of the things that I like about this movie. This whole thing is a callback to Harley's character. She's a roller derby player. This is a roller derby move. We set up this whole ending in the beginning by setting up her roller derby backstory. A whip is when I don't remember all of the position names, but basically on a roller derby team, you have your one character who's like the goal scorer, and the way that they score goals is by doing laps around the other players, which means they have to go much faster than the other players. And the way they do that is by using the other players to whip them forward. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're both skating, and then one of them grabs the other and throws her forward, basically, to give her that extra propulsion to get around. And that's what they're doing here. They are doing it on a, like, massively improbable scale. As my partner pointed out, most roller skates probably could not actually withstand the speeds that they're going at, because she's using a motorcycle to whip her around. And so this final scene is probably the most improbable scene in the whole movie, because everything she does on these skates are, like, insane, but it does look really cool. So yes, Huntress uses the motorcycle to whip her forward to the other car, and then Harley ends up doing, like, a flip onto the roof. It's, like, absolutely crazy. But she does successfully get the car that's carrying Cass and Roman to crash, leaving basically only Cassandra and Roman as survivors. And then we get our final confrontation out on this foggy, shadowy dock. Again, this is probably the most noir that the movie looks the whole time, because it's the one time that it goes almost totally, like, black and white because it's so dark and foggy. For whatever reason, this pier is lined with statues of humans, so she keeps mistaking the different statues for Roman and Cassandra, and Roman's, like, dodging in between them to hide. When she finally finds him, she wastes her last bullet on a statue that she thinks is him, but turns out not to be him. But at this point, Cassandra reveals that she has stolen a grenade and put it somewhere on Roman's person and pulled out the pin. So Harley grabs Cassandra back from Roman and pushes him out over the water, and he explodes.
And it's funny how she does it too, because she said she has the pin in her hand or in her mouth or something.
Yeah.
And she shows it to Harley Quinn and says, "Here, I have your ring," or something. I
stole your ring.
Makes it out to be a piece. I stole your ring, a piece of jewelry. And that in that instant, Harley realizes, okay, I got to protect her. So she pulls her out of the way. He still hasn't figured it out, but he does explode over the water. So
our group of women regroups at a burrito taco place with margaritas, possibly the same place that Harley went to at the beginning with her bad friends who talked about her, because she gets the same tray of margaritas that she was originally bringing to them and brings them to her new friends instead. And they're all kind of bonding. They're all talking about how cool the other women are, you know, like complimenting them on what they did in the fight and talking about what they're going to do moving forward. It's a really beautiful moment of these women.
It's very cathartic.
Yeah, these women have finally found their people, basically. They've spent the whole movie fighting everyone they come into contact with, and now they finally found each other, and it's just a really lovely moment. And then Cassandra says that she has to poop. And she goes to the bathroom to, you know, get the diamond out, and she calls Harley to come in with the colander. And of course, Harley takes this as a moment to take off with the kid. The movie kind of sets you up to think maybe Harley will become a good person at this point. No. The lesson that she learned was basically to let Cassandra into her heart, but not to give up her life of crime. She loves crime. So she takes off with the kid. But she does do
the right thing. She gives him the code.
Yeah, she gives him the code.
That's encoded in the diamonds. I can't remember what that was for.
It was for Huntress's family fortune. It's how they got her bank accounts back.
She splits everything with it, basically, because she gives Huntress her family's fortune, but then she and Cassandra go and sell the diamond, and they have enough money to start a business.
Yeah.
And then the other women are going to become the birds of prey, I assume.
Yes.
So, and here we have the birds theme. So Black Canary, she's a singer. And then there's just a whole lot of quotes in the movie. The little bird's a fucking rat. Bye bye birdie.
Yeah.
I got one for all the birds I helped fly away, saving a special spot for you.
Zaz, that was him talking about all the implied women that he's murdered. I think the implication is that he mostly murders women.
Yeah, Roman had Roman's little bird.
Yeah.
The birds are women. So the birds of prey are women who are going to prey on bad guys, we presume, because these three women are, I mean, one of them's a former police officer. She wants to fix things.
They're heroes.
And yeah, so, but not Harley.
Yeah, no, Harley Quinn and Cassandra Cain are not heroes, at least in this iteration. But these other three are. Black Canary has consistently only done the right thing. Renee Montoya was a cop, and she was a good cop. And she left the police force when it became clear that she couldn't actually do anything good with them. And Huntress is a murderer, but she was killing the people who killed her family. And there's never an indication that she's particularly bloodthirsty. It's more just like, you know, she, as a young child, she watched her whole family get brutally murdered in front of her, and that has been kind of her raison d'etre for her whole life. And there's actually a distinct moment in the fight scene in the funhouse where she says to Cassandra Clare, "You don't have to see this." There's actually a couple moments in there that I really like. When she first kills Zaz and she's talking about leaving, she does have a moment where she's like, "Well, I'm done with my vengeance quest, so I'm not really sure what I'm gonna do now." And Harley looks at her and says, "Yeah, vengeance rarely supplies us the catharsis that we seek." And she's kind of got this.
And interestingly, it's the bonding with these other women at the end that does give her the catharsis.
Exactly. So, exactly. So, you know, and I guess my point is, like, Huntress has a moral code. She has been killing people, but it has been to a moral code, and the implication here is that she will now find a much more positive outlet for these skills that she has.
They're going to be crime fighters, the three of them.
Yeah, the three of them. And I believe Harley even says that Huntress is, or she, something that she says made me think that Huntress is using her family fortune to fund their crime fighting outfit, basically.
I get that impression too. Yeah.
And then Harley ends the movie in that insane blue jacket. I don't know if I love it or hate it, but it is a very memorable outfit. She's wearing like kind of silvery pants and this bright blue jacket that's got all of these like shiny sequin appliques attached to it. Actually, I think Cassandra Cain also has kind of a similar jacket. It's not the same color, but she's also wearing a very elaborate looking jacket, and they've both got like matching.
I didn't notice any of that. All I saw was the car. So we are very different.
She steals Black Canary's car.
Her canary yellow Jaguar.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a convertible too. I forgot to mention that earlier, but it's a great car.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a fun moment for me. They drive off in the yellow Jag.
Yeah, and they are wearing like matching sunglasses. They're not the exact same sunglasses, but they're both these like rimless pink sunglasses in a very similar shape. And you can just tell that Cassandra Cain is kind of fashioning herself after Harley. She's trying to be a mini Harley.
What did she say she was going to open? What kind of business? Because it fit her personality.
I think the card says "badass motherfuckers."
Yeah, it does. But she's going to use the money to open up a business, and I can't remember now what it was.
I don't remember specifically what she says, but it kind of sounds like she's just going to be sort of an all-over crime person. Any kind of crime that you need doing, she can do it.
That might be it. Crime for hire. That sounds right. So the themes for at this point are, you know, basically that it's a man's world. All the things that men say to the women in this movie are kind of exaggerations of how men have always talked to women. So for all your noise and bluster, you're just a silly little girl with no one around to protect her. Diamonds are a girl's best friend. Musical number that's happening while he's slapping her. Every man fucks her over, even Doc. And he apologizes, but then he's not really going to apologize. I mean, he kind of sound like he's, oh yeah, I guess I did this. Sorry, but not sorry.
Yeah.
And it's one point somebody says, I think this is Ronan, who says, I think you can manage a couple of little girls. Just bring me back my diamond.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of little girls and birds, and it's a man's world.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of good, interesting themes in the movie. I just don't think it's a very good movie. I know you loved it. But
I love it.
I am not just the opposite. There's not enough character development in it for me, and there's way too much fighting. It's so cartoonish that I kept expecting word balloons with pow and wham to
I mean, they almost do that. Like every time a character who's after Harley shows up, they do a little like word splay explaining who the character is.
They do that. Yeah, you're right.
That's what I like about it. My feeling is if you're gonna make a comic book movie, make a comic book movie. Make it look like a comic book.
A comic book, yeah.
Part of what I don't like about especially the recent Marvel movies is that they are so visually boring. There's nothing happening. They're just like bland, uninteresting action movies that like technically have comic book characters in them, but they're all kind of written to talk the same, and there's no, I mean, Marvel is now notorious for hiring television directors so that these directors will come in and not have their own vision that they impart to the movie. They'll just do what the overall Marvel heads do. And to be clear, I'm not saying that I'm pro DC and anti Marvel. I think DC was doing a very similar thing. I think, I mean, not exactly the same. I do think that the Zack Snyder DC movies have a particular aesthetic. I think it's kind of a bland aesthetic, and those movies tended to not be very well written. They tended to be grim dark for the sake of being grim dark. And I prefer a comic book movie that actually has a sense of humor. This was also sort of my complaint about the Christopher Nolan movies, which are much better than a lot of the recent comic book movies. But at the time that they came out, I was like, I don't know. I like when comic book movies are funny.
And I will say that this movie has great set design. I think they do a great job with that. The choreography and the fighting is well done. Has a comic sensibility. You know, there are jokes that they throw out all the time that are pretty good, and it is, you know, cartoonish whimsy to it.
Yeah,
it's just that there is not enough, and I do like the themes. I do like that, you know, these women have been under attack in what is a man's world for them, and that's Gotham. You know, Gotham is a man's world, and it's about women finding their power. I like that. I like the music, but there's too many characters, too much fighting. The fighting is at least 30 to 40% of the film, and and they slow it down to make it to you know, drag it on. Mm-hmm. So I'm not, you know, a big fan of this movie, but there are things I like about it, but I would not give it a thumbs up if I were on Siskel and Ebert.
I mean, you tend to not like displays of violence, and I will say this is a pretty violent movie. I am a big fan of action movies, but I have a bar that I want action movies to meet. And I think that this movie meets that bar. If you're going to spend a lot of the movie doing action scenes, then I should care about the characters involved, which that's part of what I like so much about the scene in the funhouse, is that they make this effort to show these women keeping Cassandra safe. And that, to me, keeps the stakes very clearly in mind. The problem with so many of the Marvel and other DC movies is that you get these big flashy action scenes, but they're so chaotic and bland to look at, and they often don't feel like they have any stakes in them. It's very easy to just forget what we're fighting for because it's just a big, long fight scene, and the stakes weren't that clear to begin with. And I feel like this movie, the stakes are always very clear. And maybe part of that is because the stakes are fairly simplistic. You know, keep the child safe, fight the shitty men.
That's often a theme in movies set in wartime.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that happens a lot in movies that keep the child safe. That's a recurring kind of storyline.
But again, part of the reason it works for me is because I think Cassandra Cain is a very well-written child character. A lot of the time when you have a child character in these movies, they don't have a personality, or their personality is like precocious child from a movie, which a lot of those precocious characters in movies just don't feel very real. They feel like a very artificial, like, creation of Hollywood. Yeah. Like they're just supposed to stand in for all of childhood. And I don't think that Cassandra Cain is like that. I mean, first of all, she's not innocent.
That's actually a very good point, because I think the characters of Cassandra and Harley Quinn are complex in the sense that they're not completely morally good people.
Yeah.
Or characters, I should say. And we like them anyway.
Yeah.
And that's usually something that we only find male characters doing. And that kind of, not sure if it's a good guy or a bad guy, they're kind of morally questionable.
Yeah.
And with these two characters, they kind of break that mold, because it's women. Not only women, it's a woman and a child. Yeah, we do like them. We do understand their complexity, or we like that they are complex. So I like that about it. I do think that it flips it a little bit with having these female characters do
Yeah.
what usually we see men doing in movies. So I like that.
I will say, like, I flinch every time Harley Quinn breaks a dude's leg, and I always forget how many times it happens. You see her break a leg 3 times on screen. One of them is the same one twice, but it is visually very jarring, and I do flinch at that. But outside of that, like, I actually like watching these fight scenes because they look so well choreographed, and each one is visually distinct from the other. Each one has its own visual thing going on. You can just tell that they put so much effort into making these fights artistic and interesting, and you never see that in these other Marvel movies. Like, so many Marvel fights, you could just interchange the fights and it wouldn't matter.
And it's actually less violent because of that. I was not flinching at the violence in this movie at all. It did not bother me because it's so cartoonish, so incredibly and elaborately choreographed. And like you said, there's a lot of color in these scenes. I didn't flinch over the violence at all, and I usually do. Even when he explodes at the end. It you know, you warned me about it, but I thought, oh, that's what she warned me about. But it didn't really bother me because it's so cartoonish. I don't take any of the violence seriously. It's just that there's so much of it. There's so much fighting in this movie. And in fact, maybe should we get into a hot take? Because that's one of my hot takes.
Just a second. I do want to talk very briefly about the characters in the comic books, or rather in other iterations. So Cassandra Cain in the comics is a very different character. It's basically the character in name only. In the comic books, she's initially mute. She was like raised by she was the daughter of 2 assassins. When we meet her in the comics, she's mute and illiterate, and eventually she gets adopted by Batman and becomes one of the Batgirls. So Cassandra Cain in the comics, extremely different character. And this was one of the like comic book nerd complaints about the movie, is that this is the same character in name only. You might as well have just come up with an original character. They're just using the name. Apart from that, the other characters are much closer to their comic book predecessors, but I don't think Renee Montoya in the comics is ever one of the Birds of Prey. I'm not 100% sure because I'm not super familiar with her backstory, but my understanding of the Birds of Prey as a unit is that it actually originates with the original Batgirl, Barbara Gordon. There is a run of Batman where, and I have issues with this because it is a prime example of a woman suffering for a man's story, but basically at a certain point in the Batman comics, Barbara Gordon gets attacked by the Joker and permanently paralyzed, which in the comics is meant to make Batman feel all bad. But let's focus on the person that it's actually about. Barbara Gordon then goes on to become Oracle and to form the Birds of Prey with Huntress and Black Canary. And Huntress and Black Canary are the ones who actually do the physical fighting because Barbara Gordon remains paralyzed.
Bats are not birds, but okay.
Yeah, I mean, true, but she changed, she's no longer Batgirl at that point. She changes her name to Oracle, and I think it's because she's connected to the computer, so I don't remember if she actually gets psychic powers or not, but she's basically their Alfred, but more. She tells them where to go, and she's their, like, information person. So as far as I know, I don't think Renee Montoya is ever a part of it, but the other two, Huntress and Black Canary, are original members of the Birds of Prey. And the main reason I know this is because there was a very short-lived TV show called Birds of Prey that I did watch while it was on. I think this was around the, like, Smallville era. I think it might have even been technically a spin-off of Smallville, or, like, maybe it was eventually going to be folded into the same universe, but it only lasted, like, 6 episodes or something. But I did watch it because my whole life I've been waiting for, like, actual female-led stories, and so I did watch the original Birds of Prey. I don't remember, like, super loving it, but, you know, I hoped that it would last long enough to get better, and unfortunately it didn't. It was canceled.
And Smallville is the Superman story. So reminding listeners once again, in case they don't know, Batman and Superman are both DC characters.
Yes, they're in the same universe, and it's a universe.
They're in the DC universe,
where the United States has a bunch of other big cities that aren't New York, but all look like New York.
They all look like New York, yeah. And the interesting thing thing about that is though, Batman and Superman are probably, I would think, the most famous comic book characters ever. They're both DC, but Marvel has been much more successful
in
with
recent
its
years. Yeah.
Iron Man and X-Men and all those kinds of storylines and movies. And they have a whole slew. I mean, I don't even know how many. More than a dozen movies probably at this point. But if you ask the average person on the street who doesn't collect comic books, who are the most famous comic book characters, they're going to tell you Batman and Superman.
Maybe Spider-Man.
It's an interesting, maybe Spider-Man, but he was a much lesser known character. Although I think the comic books were very popular. Yeah, Spider-Man comic books were much better than the movies. The movies have been not very good.
I mean, there have been so many different Spider-Man movies. I actually think the animated Spider-Man movies, the Spider-Verse movies,
they are better.
Ones.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? And I say that as somebody who doesn't like animated movies very much. So
I mean, those movies are like widely acclaimed as like some of the greatest animated movies ever. They're like a real art project, and they're not about Peter Parker. Peter Parker is in them, but they're about Miles Morales, who is a much more modern incarnation of Spider-Man. Okay, I think that's it. I think that's all I wanted to say about the comic book background.
Okay, so that brings us to the hot takes part of the show, and I don't really have a lot because I've mostly talked about it so far, but I just feel like there's so little real story in this movie that they were forced to fill it with the fighting, which I do think is at least a third of the movie. And you liked the fighting. I did not like it. I just found it to be boring. When I'm watching a movie, I need a story. If you're gonna throw a lot of fighting at me, give me some storyline first, because I mean, it's in the first couple scenes. It's the fighting starts, and then every other scene it feels like there are major fights going on, and a lot of them involved Harley Quinn, and they are choreographed. And you're right that it's a very visually arresting kind of choreography, but it's not enough to hold my attention. I was bored. I mean, I found myself getting up to go fill my water bottle while those scenes were going on, because it's not that they were violent. They just weren't interesting to me. It's like, it felt like they put those scenes in there because they didn't have enough story to fill the movie. I mean, the movie's only an hour and 49 minutes long, and I bet you 49 minutes of it is fighting. That's my take on that. I do think the choreography is interesting. It's just not enough for me. And the movie, of course, is to me very cartoonish, and I realize that that actually appeals to you because you want comic book movies to feel like they're comic book movies, and I understand that, but to me it was just, I had a really hard time staying interested. I had to force myself. I was 10 minutes into the movie when I stopped it, and I was tired the first time I tried to watch it, but I stopped it because I thought, I don't think I can watch this. And honestly, if we had not been talking about it today, I probably would not have gone back and finished watching it. This is 10 minutes in. So I will say that there are a couple of funny moments in it. At the end of the credits, if you watch the movie all the way to the end of the credits, like everybody who watches Marvel movies does, it's very funny, and I'm not going to give it away, but you should watch it to the end if you're going to watch it. It's a very funny take on Marvel's putting preludes into the next movies into the end of their films. I did put in one of my first notes that I took on the movie, I wrote down the question, is this satire? Because it feels like they're trying to make a point about, it's a man's world, blah, blah, blah. And that's a good point to make. But they do it in such a satirical comic book way that I'm not sure anybody is going to take it seriously. So that's another problem for me, is I would have liked this to have been, I can see young men watching this and not getting that point.
I mean, young men don't get most movies, so.
Yeah, that may be true. But bravo for set design. I think that's great. It's a beautifully designed film, and it's visually very, very good. I liked the music. I'll just say a little bit about the music. So the 3 songs that ran over the credits were Diamonds, which you've already said was performed by Megan Thee Stallion with sampling of Marilyn Monroe's Diamonds Are a Girl's Best Friends. And then there's the last couple of songs that were over the credits I really liked. One of them was called Smile by Maisie Peters, and the other one was Bad Memory by K-Flav. Never heard any of these people before, and they were hip-hop songs. They were lyrics were really good. Very fitting for this film. Very feminist. Very much about women being used by men. That was all very good. Of course, there's also a Joan Jett song in the movie somewhere.
Yeah.
I Hate Myself for Loving You. And then, of course, It's a Man's World, performed by Journey? What's her first name?
Oh, Journey Smollett.
Journey Smollett Bell, but of course it was written by James Brown. So anyway, so I liked the music, and there were a lot of individual moments in the film that I liked, but overall I would not recommend this film to anybody. And I'm sorry, I know you love it.
All right, so yeah, my hot take is that this is the best comic book movie ever made. One of the best action movies I've ever seen. I mean, look, I get why you don't like it. I just think you're not as into action movies as I am. But I think if you like action movies, you will like this movie. And I think if you like actual comic book movies, you will like this movie. It is definitely for a very particular taste. It's certainly not, I mean, it's not going to win any Oscars. Obviously it didn't. It's not an Oscar bait movie, but I really liked it. I definitely think this is my favorite comic book movie of all time. I have seen it 4 or 5 times now. I never get bored. I kind of disagree with you about the plot. I think it's exactly as simple as it needs to be. I do think that they do a lot of, what is the term I want? Shorthand. Like the characters are not the most nuanced characters ever, because there are a lot of them and they do have to fit them all into the movie, but they're all very clear character types with a twist. Like the Huntress is a very classic character who again is often a man, but that character who's coming back from a family that was all but wiped out, and they're here to avenge their family members. It's a very simple story, but we understand immediately who that character is. And the twist in this movie is that she's also kind of a dork and doesn't really know how to be cool. And, no one knows the name that she wants them to know her by because she doesn't actually talk to anybody. So she wasn't able to tell anyone her name until she finally met these ladies. And Renee Montoya is very much your classic cop character who gets her badge and gun taken away, and that's when she actually gets to do all this stuff. But the twist there is that, she gets trash thrown on her, and then she has to wear that stupid balls shirt for half of the movie.
And we should say here that this Renee Montoya is played by Rosie Perez.
Yes, who's fantastic.
Great actress, yeah.
Great actress. And also, Renee Montoya is a lesbian, and her ex-girlfriend works for the DA.
They never say it in the movie, but it's real obvious, yeah.
But yeah, her ex-girlfriend is played by Ali Wong, and she works for the DA.
Who could have had more time on screen as far as I'm concerned. I love Ali Wong. She gets 2 scenes, and they're about 10 seconds each. And the first thing I wrote to you was, ooh, Ali Wong is in this. And then we don't see her again for another hour, and she gets another 10 seconds. I would have liked more Ali Wong, but okay.
Yeah, when you said that, I was like, I mean, I didn't tell you that because she's barely in the movie.
She's barely in it at all, yeah.
And then Black Canary is also kind of a subversive twist because she initially gets introduced as just the singer, a nightclub singer, and she's very beautiful, and you just sort of assume that she's going to be kind of a damsel in distress because she's just a nightclub singer, and you don't immediately know that she has these other abilities. And you also think that maybe she's just going to be one of those characters who's like not a bad person, but ends up being complicit with a lot of bad things because her job is to turn the other way. But at each of those moments, she can't turn the other way. She keeps having moments where you think she's gonna just ignore it, but then she doesn't, because ultimately she does have a moral compass. And then it turns out, not only does she have a moral compass, but she can beat your ass. She saves Harley Quinn's life.
She is definitely my favorite character in the movie. I will say that. Yeah.
She's fantastic. And then even that, there's still yet another moment of subversion because you don't know for most of the movie that she has that superpower, even though it was hinted at early on. Mm-hmm. And then at the very end of the movie, she uses it to save the day again. So yeah, I feel like none of them are like super complex characters, but they're all these very recognizable archetypes with a twist. Harley Quinn maybe is like the most emblematic of them all because she's kind of female Joker, except no, she's not. She's all of these other weird things. She's very different from the Joker. The Joker doesn't really care about anyone else, and Harley Quinn cares about her crazy psychotic hyena. Like she cares so much. She's a villain, but she still cares about like everyone that she meets, even the people who are coming after her, because she has that psychological training. She kind of can psychologically evaluate everyone. She knows everything about everyone. And that's also goes back to her origin as a character. You know, she's introduced in a way that's supposed to make you think that she's stupid, and then it turns out she's got a medical degree and a PhD, and she can psychologically evaluate every single person she meets within like a couple of minutes. You know, all of these characters are these kind of twists on what you expect, and that to me is enough. I don't need anything more than that, because this isn't meant to be like the deepest movie of all time. It's just a fun action movie, and that gives me enough to go off of. Also, I love a movie where women team up to beat the shit out of some men. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would also add one last comment that I'm really happy. This was made 5 years ago, and I'm very pleased that Margot Robbie has not been pigeonholed, because she did do the Barbie movie, which is also kind of comic book like, you know, in the sense that it was comic book like. It's you know, so it's cartoonish.
It's very artificial.
It's artificial. Both of these movies are, but she has made a whole slew of movies in between that prove to us that she is a very good actress.
And a very versatile actress. She can do a lot of different stuff. So in conclusion, we have two very different takes. It's obviously a polarizing movie. You know, I've enjoyed a lot of the Oscar bait movies that we've seen, but I probably wouldn't watch any of them again. You know, I'm a basic kind of girl, and I want a movie to be fun and funny.
Well, and I wouldn't say that I don't like action movies. There's been a lot of action movies that I love, but I think the fight scenes and the action scenes have to support the story and not just be there as a way to fill time. But overall, I didn't like this movie, but it made for good discussion, because we don't always disagree. In fact, we hardly ever do. So it's nice to have something to discuss in a less, well, they just agree on everything thing for our listeners. So anyway, so that, dear listeners, is all for today.
I'm Tessa Dare. You can find me at my website, tessadare.com, where you can sign up for my email list, or you can follow me on Instagram and Threads at author.tess.adair, and you can find us on Patreon at patreon.com/whereyoulead.
And I'm Beth Von Barron. You can follow me on Instagram at STL_writer_Beth, or sign up for my weekly Substack email, Saturday Morning Musings, at stlwriterbeth.substack.com. This has been Woman Inherits the Earth, a discussion podcast about women in movies from the perspective of a mother and daughter. Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'll tune in for our next episode in about 2 weeks. See you then.